Well, good evening YouTube, and welcome to the next edition of Illini Prepper's video series on preparedness for 3-day Go Kit bags. Tonight we're going to talk about that next step in food, water, and shelter that we're working on, and that is the water piece. Water is the source of life. Without water, life as we know it would not exist, and you yourself would not exist. The vast majority of our body weight consists of water, so it is a very, very important thing to have. But it is one of the trickiest things to have on hand for your survival. We're going to start working on this water for your disaster supplies kit or your Go kits. Tonight we may have to move this into a two-parter video because it's, as I said, a detailed subject. But water is very important and well worth the time we're going to dedicate to it. So let's start talking about water for our 3-day disaster supplies kits. Water, by its very existence as a liquid, is a very heavy item to carry it. As a matter of fact, 1 gallon of water weighs approximately 8 pounds, actually a little bit over 8 pounds, and that's 1 US gallon of water. So it's very heavy to carry, and therefore when you're planning your grab and go kits, if you don't want to carry a lot of weight, you've got to keep in mind that you're not going to be able to carry all the water with you that you would like to have on hand. So the key thing to remember about water is carry some on you. Typically in military and search and rescue circles, they recommend having 2 quarts of water on hand at any given time. That's why when you see military guys running around, they'll usually have, if they're wearing canteens, they'll usually have 2 quart-sized canteens on them, or one of the giant 2-quart canteen bottles. So that's basically all the water you're going to want to carry at any given time. The next thing you want to keep in mind is you want to have something to carry that water in. So let's cover that in a little bit more detail. In front of you here I have some examples of ways to carry water. Over the years, many different ways have been developed in the civilian and military markets to carry water on your person. And there are different ways that you can adapt items to carry water. So let's start with one of the tried and true methods. The military 1-quart canteen, as I mentioned earlier. The items in the video in front of you are examples of the military quart-sized canteens. The one on the left is an older style canteen that was made out of metal, but for a couple of decades, several decades now, they have been made out of plastic, and that's for a variety of reasons. But the more modern canteens you'll see are made out of plastic. So your general quart-sized canteen is going to be a very economical way to acquire a container to carry water, because these can be found very cheaply on the surplus market. If you go online and Google military surplus, they all have different deals on military 1-quart canteens, so check those out. It's a little harder to find the metal canteens these days, but I like metal because you can boil and cook with it to a certain extent. But you can find those online for very cheap, or go to your local military surplus shop. I'm a huge fan of supporting local vendors, so check out your local military surplus. But then again, be careful, don't get fleeced. Some of those guys know they have a corner on the market in the local area and they run with it. So do a little bit of price research before you go out. So the military quart-sized canteen is a good way to go. They have specific containers or specific carriers that are designed to carry that canteen. And there are accessories that go along with it that also go along with acquiring water. So we'll move on to that next here. Down here I have an example of a black one. And if you zoom in here, that's an example of a quart-sized canteen carrying case. Black. More often than not you'll find olive drab out there though. Those are the old canteen systems that go with the Alice gear. Alice gear is a military type of gear that goes back to the early part of this decade, or rather the early part of the 2000s and also into the 1990s. Accessories, you're going to have things like the canteen cup, which you have in front of you here, and you will have things like a canteen stove. These items can be found in various kinds and types. I prefer the canteen cup that has the built-in handle, the solid handle there. The more common ones you'll find these days are kind of a butterfly handle. The handles fold in along the side of the cup. But people have their different preferences. Just go with the one that you have. And the canteen stove is essentially a formed piece of aluminum designed to fit snugly in the system so you can carry it all together. It fits the canteen cup and creates a space below it so that you can put fuel in there and boil water in the canteen cup. So when you combine the military quart-sized canteen with the stove and the canteen cup, you have additionally a self-contained cooking and or purifying system. I'm going to get into water purifying here in a minute, but a really nice system that the military has developed and used for many years, tried and true, as the saying goes. Next, I'm going to move on and talk about some of the civilian options. In front of you here, you have a Nalgene, a metal Nalgene bottle. Nalgene is more known for their plastic bottles, their unbreakable plastic bottles. And there's a designed carrying case to carry the Nalgene bottle. Nalgene took a corner on the market. Their bottles are very popular. Like I said, they're very sturdy, unbreakable. I like the metal ones again because you can warm them, you can cook with them a little to a certain extent. But Nalgene bottles are very, very popular out there. And they're going to carry probably about 2 liters, maybe a little bit less, of water. So Nalgene bottles are a good option to have on hand, and you see them a lot out there. I carry mine on my search and rescue gear, so keep that in mind. Nalgene is a very good option, and there are some accessories made for that. Another option is a good old-fashioned Pepsi bottle. I keep a Pepsi bottle or soda bottle, small drink size, in my gear as an extra water container. You always want to keep in mind you want to have a container to carry extra water with you. Also, it can be used to harvest water to purify, things along those lines. So you've got some civilian-made water carrying devices there that you can easily attach to your equipment. Keep that in mind. Whatever you pick, you need to be able to carry it easily with you and attach it to your gear, or carry it in your gear. Finally, in terms of water containment, there is a water bladder there. This one actually is a brand name Camelback. Camelbacks have hit the market early in the last decade, and they took it by storm. Very wonderful way to carry water, easy, close against your back, typically in a designed carrier for it. A lot of the packs that are out there nowadays are designed and adapted to carry some sort of a water bladder in them and fit the inlet tube out. The nice thing about the Camelbacks, unlike the canteens and the Nalgenes, because it has that straw tube that fits out through your gear, you can keep that right up in front of you with ready access, so you can drink, you can sip on the go. A lot of people find that very, very handy, and many military guys you see out in the field in the videos these days will have those tubes hanging down. They're very popular on the battlefield and in the search and rescue and outdoor community now. The one downside of the Camelback, which a good friend of mine is fond of calling them death packs, and nothing against Camelback. It's an opinion that she has. They are called death packs because unlike these other items where it's very easy to monitor the amount of fluid that you're taking in, a Camelback is very difficult to monitor the amount of fluid that you're taking in. So if the objective is to avoid dehydration, avoid not having enough water, a Camelback is harder to monitor. And a lot of times you see out in the field with folks who are walking heavy through the woods, working really hard. They're sipping on the Camelback, but they have no idea, no concept of how much water they're consuming. And you'll find guys suffering from dehydration who still have quite a bit of fluid left in their packs because they just had no concept of what they were consuming. So be careful of that with the Camelbacks. But otherwise, a very popular way to carry water into the field. I carry mine as an extra water container or as an adaptable water container. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is this Sierra cup here. It's a civilian metal cup, kind of designed on the market. There's different versions of it now, but designed for very similar purposes as the canteen cup, but more for throwing in your pack. It can be used as a plate, used as a cup, used as a bowl, or used as a container to boil and purify water. So a very useful item. I keep mine in one of my packs. Now I have to admit that it was a little harder for me to assemble these items for this video tonight because some of the stuff was not where it was supposed to be. As you go into your preparedness lifestyle, you will learn that sometimes things get out of place, and that's why it's good to check on them every now and then. Go through your year, make sure it's all there. So that covers the topic of water containers for your 3-day pack. Remember, you need to have enough to carry at least 2 quarts of water on you and have extra water containers to acquire water if necessary. So those are some basic ideas of how to carry water with you in your 72, your hour gear, your 3-day pack. So let's talk a little bit about how you'll acquire that water, because you can't carry too much water on you at any given time. You're going to have means by which you can replenish the water that you have consumed. And typically you're gonna, on heavy work days, you're gonna want to consume about 2 quarts an hour. So that's quite a bit of water. For lesser activity, it's gonna get spread out some more, but as you can see, 2 quarts isn't gonna last you terribly long. And I forgot to mention that you can also get your typical, liter-sized water bottles, which also function as good extra containers. But if you're just going out in the field and want to throw a couple of bottles in there, that's a good idea to carry some extra water on you. But as I said, you'll need a way to acquire water. And when you're away from usual water sources, you're going to need to have ways to purify the water that you acquire. In front of you, I have a few options of how to purify that water. There are many different ways to purify water. You've got pure filters, you've got chemical means, and you've got typical boiling, which is a very traditional way to purify water. In front of you, you have 2 examples of filters and 1 of chemicals. And I already touched on boiling water a little bit, covering the previous items. The item on the right is a Katadyn Hiker Pro filter. Katadyn makes many different types of water filters, and this is an example of one of them. The Katadyn type of water filter is really good. It filters out a lot of bacteria, a lot of parasites, but one thing you have to keep in mind about filters is typically they cannot filter down to a level low enough to catch viruses. But for most water sources in the United States, they work perfectly fine. People have used them in the field for years.